On behalf of the committee, I welcome everyone to this public hearing into the Territory Coordinator Bill 2025. I welcome to the table to give evidence to the committee from the Larrakia Nation Aboriginal Corporation, Michael Rodimer, Chief Executive Officer. Thank you for coming before the committee. We appreciate you taking the time to speak to the committee and look forward to hearing from you today. This is a formal proceeding of the committee, and the protection of parliamentary privilege and the obligation not to mislead the committee apply. This is a public hearing and is being webcast through the Assembly's website. A transcript will be made for use of the committee and may be put on the committee's website. If at any time during the hearing you are concerned that what you will say should not be made public, you may ask the committee to go into a closed session and take your evidence in private. Can you please state your name and the capacity in which you are appearing?
Firstly, I acknowledge the Larrakia people as the traditional custodians of the land we meet on today. I also acknowledge elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all First Nations people here today. My name is Michael Rodimer. I am a Wadja man and traditional owner from Western Arnhem Land. In my capacity as CEO, I'm speaking on behalf of Larrakia Nation Aboriginal Corporation, the representative body of the Larrakia people, the traditional owners of Darwin.
Thank you. Before we begin, I'd like to quickly introduce my fellow committee members. We have the member for Wadja, Mr. Chancey Paik, the member for Drysdale, Mr. Clinton Howe, the member for Johnston, Justine Davis, and joining us via telecommunications is the member for Wanguru, Ms. Ollie Carlson. And I'm Andrew Mackay, the member for Goyder. Mr. Rodimer, would you like to make an opening statement?
Yes. The Northern Territory has long been heavily reliant on Commonwealth funding, with around 70% of the NT government's revenue coming from federal sources. This dependence is deeply embedded in the Territory's economic structure, driven by our small population, vast geography, and the high cost of delivering services to remote communities. The claim that the economy can be rebuilt under the guise of a Territory Coordinator is smoke and mirrors, because no such role would change this fundamental reality. Larrakia Nation strongly opposes the Territory Coordinator Bill in its current form due to its failure to respect Larrakia governance, its risks to sacred sites and cultural values, and its potential to undermine Indigenous rights across the Northern Territory. Larrakia lands and waters were never ceded. In fact, no Aboriginal land across the Northern Territory or this country were never ceded. Unlike many other colonial contexts where treaties were signed between Indigenous peoples and colonising powers, British settlers in Australia claimed sovereignty over this land under the doctrine of terra nullius. This ignored the existing land ownership and governance systems of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. But in 1992, the Australian High Court Mabo decision overturned terra nullius, recognising that Indigenous peoples had a legal claim to land before British colonisation. Despite this, the land was never formally ceded through treaties or agreements, where Australia is one of the few settler colonial nations without a formal treaty with Indigenous peoples. Then in 2009, Australia formally endorsed the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but in practice, its compliance, especially regarding free, prior and informed consent, remains inconsistent. The current system has fallen well short of enabling Indigenous communities to exercise genuine control over decisions affecting their lands, waters and culture. And Larrakia demand that the principles of free, prior and informed consent be embedded in the bill. Larrakia people must be central to any decisions about development, planning and coordination on Larrakia country, not sidelined by a Territory Coordinator with unchecked powers. Larrakia lands and waters hold deep cultural significance, and any changes must be made in consultation with Larrakia elders and custodians. Weak safeguards risk irreversible damage to our sacred sites, land and waters, similar to the destruction of sacred sites like what happened at Juukan Gorge in Western Australia, further highlighting the gap between international obligations and domestic practice. Larrakia have always been the custodians of this land. Larrakia will continue to stand strong to protect it. Larrakia are not opposed to progress, but it must be done with Larrakia, not to Larrakia or other First Nations people across the NT. We stand in solidarity with other Aboriginal groups who may face the same loss of autonomy, disregard for cultural values and environmental threats. We call on the NT Government to engage in genuine consultation with all affected First Nation groups before moving forward with this bill. Larrakia Nation strongly recommends the bill be withdrawn or significantly amended to guarantee First Nations decision-making authority in development processes, ensure full protection of sacred sites and cultural values, require free, prior and informed consent from traditional owners before any projects proceed, embed strong environmental protections and prevent rushed approvals for projects that may cause harm, commit to real consultation with Larrakia Nation and other affected First Nations groups. Larrakia are not just stakeholders, they are the traditional owners. Their rights, their lands, waters and culture must be respected. We urge the NT Government to listen to First Nations voices and ensure any legislation upholds our rights, our cultural values and our future. Thank you.
Thank you. You spoke about the incorporation of free, prior and informed consent principles into the bill. Do you have any recommendations of what you might like that to look like on behalf of your organisation?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of confusion around what consultation is and what consent is. And so, I think ensuring that free, prior and informed consent through consultation means the majority of that family group or that clan group or that traditional owner group is giving full consent and support for that particular project.
So do you have any specific recommendations of how you'd like that to, this committee's purpose is to suggest recommendation. I was wondering if you had any particular ways, how do you enshrine that principle into part of the consultation piece, or like how do you, I'm just
look, I think
happy to take advice here.
Yeah, I think, my extensive background working for the Commonwealth, and noting large community projects, the territory is so reliant on the Commonwealth for that funding. So bidding for billions of dollars worth of funding around infrastructure projects to benefit all Territorians, okay, that consultation must be done at the bid stage, not at the tender stage where the contract is going out. You know what I mean? So you've got 3 and 5 years where these projects have been planned and planned and planned. Submission goes into the Commonwealth, and then at the 11th hour, the Northern Land Council is coming to traditional owners because a tender's gone out seeking their approval. So we've got to get smarter in how we go about that.
So with relation to the Territory Coordinator Bill, you'd like to see some provisions around like the territory development areas and the IDA, I think is the other one, relating to that kind of traditional owner, like prior to them being implemented. Is that?
Yeah, definitely.
Where we're looking?
I've met with the Chief Minister around, we talk about having an agreement with Larrakia traditional owners. We talked about future development in and around on Larrakia country and the need to be able to go, right, here is the planning on Larrakia country for the next 30 to 50 years. Let's not look at, Lee Point, Holtz at the 11th hour. Let's sit down with our elders. Let's get that consent up front, well in advance, before these development opportunities get turned on.
And I'll open it up to the committee. I'll recognise Member for Johnston to start. Or if you've got a question.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, there. Thank you, Michael, for your submission, for appearing today, and to Larrakia people for looking after the country that we're on today. I was interested that you talked about in your submission that the economy of the Northern Territory, is in the huge majority relying on the Commonwealth. I'm wondering whether you can see any economic argument for this bill, which is what's outlined as its purpose.
Yeah, like I said, I think since self-government, the territory's been heavily reliant on the Commonwealth, and I don't think this bill will change that significantly. I think there's already provisions in place to drive the economy within regulations and legislations now, but I think what government needs to look at is the red tape within the bureaucracies that are slowing things down. I think it was, the previous speaker in the Minerals Council Catherine Tilmouth spoke about some of those delays happening, and it's working through that process of being a bit smarter in how we go about our business. It's working harder and not smarter and not harder.
And
Michael,
we've certainly heard.
From Justine's point, I just don't want to lose your line of thought. It's safe to say that Larrakia Nation would be of the view that they're not holding up development. The hold up of development is with the bureaucracy in its current form. That's what needs to be streamlined, not diminishing consultation or approvals in that process. It's, as Justine has asked the question, Larrakia Nation doesn't believe that they're holding anything up. It's the already existing government bureaucracy.
Yeah, I think if you know, obviously we're not on our land here.
No.
For Larrakia. My country's in West Island, I'm on our land. I see the difference and the impact it has on Larrakia. And that's why we need to work on something with Larrakia to enable progress. Larrakia is open to progress, but it's about putting in the correct measures in place and respecting sacred sites that are obviously not on Aura, and there is sacred sites here and sites of significance that we need to ensure that we are not impacting on those sacred sites or destroying them like Duke and Gorge, for example.
If I can, I really like the point you said there about like long-term planning, because I'd be in agreement. I think we've lost some visionary stuff that I think we could do. Would you like if the territory coordinator in some way could facilitate for people like you and me to sit down and go, okay, what could this area look like in 50 years? And consult early and actually have that kind of visionary outlook. If there was a way we can tie that in, do you think that could be quite positive?
Definitely positive. Like I said, we met with the chief around setting up a council of elders for Larrakia to work through the future planning and development opportunities for Larrakia country, the Darwin region. So, that opportunity to do that would be an opportunity gone missed.
Cool. The member for Johnson.
Thank you. You've just made reference again there to the idea of working in partnership, and that you've had those discussions, already. In relation to this bill, what would working in partnership with Larrakia Nation or with First Nations people across the territory look like?
Yeah, as I stated, I think it's got to be guaranteeing that First Nations decision-making authority in the development process, and that planning process. They're highly involved in that, and sometimes that does take time because there are some very complex sacred sites that need to be dealt with, and it's not easy of just knocking over a tree and crossing a river. Those places have special meanings to our people. So that's why we've got to ensure the full protection of sacred sites and cultural values. Ensuring we've got the free, prior and informed consent, and I guess embedding strong environmental protections. We only have one country. Yeah. We ruin it, it's all over.
Just on that point, what do you see is at risk? What are the risks to this bill going through as it is? I mean, we've heard, and I think to Chance's follow-up question as well, we've heard a lot about the idea of delays. We've heard that being blamed on various individuals and organisations. We've also heard about the need to have good social licence when you're developing projects to make sure that they're actually going to work. If a bill like this went through, from the perspective of Larrakia Nation, what do you see the risks to our long-term future in the territory might be?
Well, they'll be doing movies like Erin Brockovich. Put simply.
We've got time for one more question.
Sorry, Michael, just wanting to confirm if you are of the view that there should be mandatory consultation processes built into the legislation.
100%.
On behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you for appearing today and taking the time out of your busy day to be here. It's very much appreciated, especially with the short turnaround. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you, Davis.